Dr. Maya Richardson stood in front of her bathroom mirror, carefully studying her reflection as she prepared for what might be the most important undercover operation of her career. At 45, she had built her life from the ground up, turning her brilliant medical innovations into a fortune that allowed her to purchase and transform Richardson Memorial Hospital. But today, she wouldn't look anything like the successful hospital owner she was. "This is the only way to know the truth," she whispered to herself, gently pulling her normally well-styled hair into a messy bun. She had been hearing whispers, reading concerning reviews, and receiving anonymous letters about discriminatory treatment in her emergency room. As someone who believed in hands-on leadership, she knew she had to experience it firsthand. Maya reached for the old clothes she had carefully selected from a thrift store. A worn-out gray sweater with small holes near the hem, baggy jeans that had seen better days, and scuffed sneakers that looked like they might fall apart any minute. She had spent weeks planning this, even visiting several homeless shelters to observe and understand how to make her disguise convincing without being disrespectful. As she applied a special makeup technique to make her skin appear weathered and tired, Maya remembered her own grandmother's stories about facing discrimination in hospitals back in the 1960s. Things were supposed to have changed by now, she thought, dabbing dark circles under her eyes. Her grandmother had been the one who inspired her to become a doctor, to make sure everyone got the care they deserved. The transformation took almost 2 hours. Maya added layers of carefully selected clothes, deliberately mismatched and worn. She practiced her walking pattern, not too straight, showing the weight of someone who carried their belongings everywhere. She even created a backstory for herself, a former office worker who lost everything during the economic downturn, dealing with chronic health issues but unable to afford regular care. Looking at her reflection one final time, Maya barely recognized herself. Her natural elegance was hidden under layers of carefully crafted hardship. She grabbed the old backpack she had prepared, filled with a few worn blankets, some empty food containers, and her phone carefully hidden in a torn inner pocket. The phone was set to record everything, but it looked like an old model that barely worked. Before leaving her apartment through the back entrance to avoid her usual security, Maya took a deep breath. She couldn't help but think about the irony. She owned the very hospital she was about to visit as a homeless person. The building had her family name on it, yet she was about to find out if that name meant anything more than just letters on a wall. As she rode the bus across town, another detail to make her story more convincing, Maya observed how people already treated her differently. Some avoided eye contact, others clutched their bags closer when she passed by. It was a small taste of what was to come, and it made her even more determined to go through with her plan. The morning was chilly, and Maya felt the cold seeping through her intentionally inadequate clothing. She had chosen to arrive just as the day shift was starting, when the emergency room would be transitioning between staff and potentially at its most vulnerable to revealing its true colors. As the hospital came into view, she felt her heart racing, not from fear, but from anticipation of what she might discover. Walking up to the emergency room entrance, Maya noticed how the security guard's expression changed as soon as he spotted her. She had hired that same guard 3 months ago, but now he was looking at her like she was a potential threat. Maya steeled herself, knowing that what was about to unfold would either confirm her worst fears or restore her faith in the system she had worked so hard to build. Just before pushing open the emergency room doors, Maya pressed the record button on her phone. Whatever happened next would be documented, every word, every action, every moment of truth about how her hospital really treated its most vulnerable patients. She had no idea that in the next few hours she would uncover far more than she had ever expected and set in motion a chain of events that would change not just her hospital, but the lives of everyone involved. The emergency room was surprisingly quiet when Maya walked in, with only a few patients scattered across the waiting area. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows that made everyone look sicker than they probably were. Maya's chest was actually hurting now, a combination of anxiety and the tight bandage she had wrapped around her ribs to change her posture. She made her way to the reception desk, where a young nurse was typing away at a computer. The nurse barely looked up, simply pushing a clipboard toward Maya and mumbling, "Fill this out." Maya noticed how different this greeting was from the hospital's standard protocol of immediate friendly acknowledgement, a policy she had personally implemented last year. Before Maya could even reach for the clipboard, head nurse Karen Whitaker appeared. Maya recognized her immediately. She had been with the hospital for 15 years and was known for running a tight ship. Karen took one look at Maya, and her expression shifted from professional to suspicious in an instant. "Can I help you?" Karen's voice was loud enough to make several people in the waiting room look up. Maya could feel their eyes on her, watching the scene unfold. She hunched her shoulders slightly, playing her part while her hidden phone recorded everything. "Yes, please," Maya said softly, making her voice rough and tired. "I've been having chest pains since last night. They're getting worse." She pressed her hand against her chest, which wasn't entirely an act anymore. The stress of the situation was making her heart race. Karen's lip curled slightly. "Do you have insurance?" The question came before any assessment of Maya's symptoms, a direct violation of emergency room protocol. Maya watched as Karen's eyes swept over her worn clothes and unwashed hair, making judgments with every glance. "No, but," Maya started to explain, but Karen cut her off with a sharp wave of her hand. "We've been dealing with this all week," she announced loudly, looking around as if seeking support from others. "People coming in here, taking advantage, thinking we're some kind of free hotel." The young nurse at the computer looked uncomfortable, shifting in her seat and pretending to be absorbed in her screen. Maya noticed how she kept glancing up, clearly conflicted about what was happening but unwilling to challenge her superior. "I just need to see a doctor," Maya insisted, trying to keep her voice steady. "The pain is getting worse, and I think it might be serious." She reached for the clipboard again, but Karen snatched it away. "Oh, it's always serious with you people," Karen said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Let me guess, you need a warm bed for the night? Maybe some free food? We're an emergency room, not a homeless shelter." Maya felt her throat tighten, not from acting but from genuine emotion. She had no idea this kind of behavior was happening in her hospital. The way Karen emphasized "you people" made several other patients look away in embarrassment. One elderly woman actually gathered her belongings and moved to a seat further away, as if Maya's presence might somehow contaminate her. "The law requires you to at least examine me," Maya said, making sure to sound desperate rather than knowledgeable. "Please, I really don't feel well." This seemed to anger Karen even more. "Oh, now you're going to tell me about the law?" She stepped out from behind the desk, her shoes clicking sharply on the linoleum floor. "I've been a nurse for 20 years. Don't you dare tell me how to do my job." The few other people in the waiting room were now openly staring, creating an audience for Karen's performance. Some looked sympathetic, others seemed to agree with Karen, and most just appeared uncomfortable with the whole situation. "If you don't leave right now," Karen continued, reaching for the phone on the desk, "I'll call security. We don't need your kind causing trouble here." The young nurse at the computer had stopped pretending to work and was watching with wide eyes, her hands frozen over the keyboard. Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes, real ones, not from fear or humiliation, but from pure disappointment. This was her hospital, the place she had poured her heart and soul into, and this was how people were being treated. She thought about all the other vulnerable patients who might have faced this same treatment, but without the power she had to change things. Just then, another wave of pain shot through Maya's chest. The stress of the situation wasn't helping, and she realized with some irony that she might actually need medical attention soon. But Karen was already dialing security, speaking into the phone with exaggerated patience. "Yes, we have a situation in the ER. Could you please send someone to remove a disruptive individual?" Maya stood her ground, knowing that every word, every action was being recorded. She thought about her grandmother again, about all the times she had been turned away from hospitals just like this. History wasn't just repeating itself, it had never really changed. But after tonight, things would be different. Maya knew that what she was witnessing wasn't just unprofessional behavior, it was a symptom of a deeper problem, one she now had documented evidence of. 2 security guards arrived within minutes, their footsteps echoing through the now silent emergency room. Maya recognized both of them. She had approved their hiring just 6 months ago. The taller guard, who usually greeted her with a bright smile every morning, now looked at her with a stern expression that held no recognition. "Ma'am," the shorter guard said, his voice professionally neutral, "I'll need you to come with us." He reached for Maya's arm, but she took a step back, making sure her phone was still recording everything. "Please," Maya said, her voice trembling slightly, partly from acting and partly from genuine emotion. "I just need to see a doctor. I have chest pains. Isn't there some kind of law about turning away emergency patients?" Karen jumped in before either guard could respond. "Oh, here we go again with the law. You people always want to talk about your rights, but what about our rights? What about the rights of the real patients who need help?" She gestured dramatically at the waiting room, where the few other patients tried their best to look anywhere but at the unfolding scene. The young nurse at the reception desk finally spoke up, her voice quiet but clear. "Maybe we should at least check her vitals?" She immediately shrank back when Karen shot her a fierce look. "Don't encourage this behavior," Karen snapped at the young nurse. "This is exactly why we're overwhelmed, because people take advantage of our kindness. Next thing you know, she'll be here every week, treating this place like her personal clinic." Maya noticed a middle-aged woman in the waiting room shaking her head disapprovingly at Karen's behavior. The woman seemed to want to say something, but then looked at her own admission paperwork and remained silent. This was exactly what Maya had feared, not just the discrimination, but how it silenced everyone around it. "I can see you're busy," Maya said, her voice stronger now as she addressed Karen directly. "But I've been having chest pain for hours. What if this is serious? What if something happens to me after you turn me away?" Karen rolled her eyes so dramatically it seemed almost theatrical. "Oh, trust me, honey, I've been doing this job long enough to know a real emergency when I see one. You're just looking for attention and a warm bed. We're not falling for it." The security guards shifted uncomfortably, clearly uncertain about the situation. This wasn't a case of someone being disruptive. It was simply a person asking for medical help. The taller guard cleared his throat. "Ma'am, hospital policy does state." "I know the policy." Karen interrupted sharply. "And I know when someone is trying to abuse the system. We have procedures for dealing with." She paused meaningfully, looking Maya up and down. "Certain types of people." Maya felt her hand trembling as she reached into her pocket, pressing the second record button on her phone to make sure everything was being captured from multiple angles. She had expected to find some problems in her hospital's emergency care, but this level of open discrimination was shocking. "What do you mean by certain types of people?" Maya asked quietly, making sure to capture this critical moment. The waiting room had grown so quiet you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Karen's face flushed red. "Don't try to twist my words. You know exactly what I mean. We get people like you all the time, thinking you can just walk in here and demand treatment without any way to pay. This isn't a charity." Actually, the young nurse spoke up again, her voice slightly stronger this time. "We are a non-profit hospital, and our mission statement clearly says..." "Be quiet," Karen snapped. "You haven't been here long enough to understand how these people operate. Security, please remove her from the premises, and make sure to note her description so she doesn't try to come back tonight." The guards moved forward again, but Maya stood her ground. She wasn't afraid. She was gathering evidence. Every word, every action, every violation of hospital policy was being recorded. She thought about all the people who had faced this same treatment but hadn't had the power to fight back. "If something happens to me because you refuse to help," Maya said clearly, making sure her voice would be picked up by the recording, "it will be on your conscience. Is that really the kind of nurse you want to be?" For a brief moment, something flickered across Karen's face, perhaps a hint of doubt or guilt. But it was quickly replaced by her previous mask of contempt. "Get her out of here," she commanded the guards. "And don't let her back in unless she has proper insurance and identification." As the guards gently but firmly took Maya's arms, she noticed the young nurse quickly wiping away a tear. Several patients in the waiting room were now openly watching, their faces showing a mix of emotions: shame, anger, sympathy, and relief that they weren't the ones being targeted. Maya allowed herself to be led toward the exit, knowing she had gathered more than enough evidence. Tomorrow would bring changes, but tonight she had to play this role until the end. She had to experience exactly what countless others had endured in her hospital: a place that was supposed to help everyone, regardless of their appearance or ability to pay. The security guards led Maya through the sliding glass doors into the cool night air. Their grip on her arms was gentle. She could tell they felt uncomfortable with the situation. As they reached the parking lot, the taller guard quietly said, "There's a free clinic about 10 blocks from here. They open at 8 a.m. Maya nodded, noting how even in following orders, some people still try to help. She watched as they walked back inside, leaving her alone in the dimly lit parking lot. But she didn't leave right away. Instead, she found a bench near the emergency room entrance, just within view of the security cameras she had had installed last year. From her position, she could see everything happening inside through the glass doors. Karen was back at her station, looking smug as she talked to another nurse. The young nurse who had tried to help was nowhere to be seen. Maya's chest still hurt, but now it was more from the anger and sadness of what she had witnessed. As she sat there, she noticed something even more disturbing. Within the next hour, 2 more people who appeared to be struggling financially were turned away. They weren't kicked out as dramatically as she had been, but she watched as Karen gave them the same dismissive treatment, the same excuses, the same violations of hospital policy. An elderly man with a limp was told the wait would be at least 8 hours, when Maya could clearly see the waiting room was nearly empty. A young mother with a sick child was questioned so aggressively about insurance that she left in tears. Each incident made Maya's blood boil, but she forced herself to stay calm and keep recording. Around midnight, a well-dressed businessman walked in clutching his arm. Maya watched as Karen's entire demeanor changed. Suddenly, she was all smiles and efficiency, getting him checked in within minutes. The contrast was so stark it was almost unbelievable, but Maya had it all on video. The night grew colder, and Maya pulled her worn jacket tighter around her shoulders. A few hospital staff members passed by, some giving her suspicious looks, others pretending not to see her. One nurse actually brought her a cup of water when Karen wasn't looking, whispering, "I'm sorry about earlier." Maya used this time to take notes on her phone, documenting everything she saw. She thought about all the changes she would need to make, not just firing one prejudiced nurse, but addressing the systemic issues that allowed such behavior to go unchecked. How many people had suffered because the hospital she owned had failed them? Around 2 a.m., a young man was brought in by ambulance. Even from outside, Maya could hear Karen's voice change when she realized the patient was from a wealthy family she recognized. The difference in treatment was like night and day. "We'll take care of everything," Karen assured the family. "Don't worry about the paperwork now." Maya had seen enough. Her chest pain had subsided, but her determination had only grown stronger. She stood up from the bench, her joints stiff from sitting in the cold for so long. As she walked away from the hospital, she noticed the security cameras following her movement, the same cameras that had recorded everything that happened tonight. She took a long route home, staying in character until she was well away from the hospital. Her mind was already racing with plans for tomorrow. The evidence she had gathered was damning: the recordings, the security footage, the pattern of discrimination she had witnessed over several hours. But what bothered her most wasn't just Karen's behavior. It was how the system had allowed this to happen, how fear and prejudice had become so normalized that most people just accepted it. She thought about the young nurse who had tried to speak up, only to be silenced. About the security guards who clearly knew what was happening was wrong, but felt powerless to stop it. As she finally reached her apartment building, Maya looked at her phone. 6 hours of recordings, dozens of incidents, all captured in crystal clear audio and video. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, she had walked in the shoes of those her hospital had failed, and that experience would stay with her forever. She took one last look at her appearance in her phone's camera: the disheveled hair, the worn clothes, the tired eyes. In just a few hours, she would transform back into Dr. Maya Richardson, owner and administrator of Richardson Memorial Hospital. But she wouldn't forget how it felt to be treated as less than human, to be denied care because of how she looked. As she prepared for bed, Maya made a promise to herself and to every patient who had ever been turned away. This would never happen again in her hospital. Tomorrow would be the beginning of real change, not just for Karen, but for the entire system that had allowed this discrimination to flourish. The next morning, Richardson Memorial Hospital buzzed with unusual activity. An emergency board meeting had been called for 9 a.m. sharp, and rumors flew through the hallways. The young nurse from last night's shift was just finishing up her paperwork when she noticed several serious-looking people in business suits walking toward the conference room. Karen was at her usual spot at the nurse's station, looking fresh and professional as always. She was telling another nurse about how she had handled a difficult situation last night, painting herself as the hero who protected the hospital from troublemakers. She had no idea that her world was about to turn upside down. At exactly 9 a.m., Dr. Maya Richardson walked through the hospital's main entrance. She looked nothing like the homeless woman from last night. Her hair was perfectly styled, her designer suit was immaculate, and her presence commanded immediate attention. The security guard who had escorted her out just hours ago did a double take, his face turning pale as recognition slowly dawned. Maya stopped at the nurse's station, where Karen was still chatting about her night shift adventures. It took Karen a moment to notice her, but when she did, the color drained from her face. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out as she stared at the woman she had thrown out of the emergency room, now standing before her in an expensive suit with an ID badge that read Chief Administrator and Owner. "Good morning, Karen," Maya said calmly, though her heart was racing. "I believe we met last night, though I was dressed a bit differently." The other nurses at the station froze, some with coffee cups halfway to their mouths, others stopping mid-conversation to watch the scene unfold. Karen's hands began to shake. "Dr. Richardson, I don't understand." "You will," Maya replied, her voice firm but not unkind. "Please join us in the conference room. We'd have some security footage to review." She turned to the young nurse who had tried to help the night before. "You too, please. We need witnesses from last night's shift." Word spread through the hospital like wildfire. Staff members whispered to each other in corners, trying to piece together what was happening. The story seemed too incredible to be true. Had their boss really gone undercover as a homeless person? Had Karen really thrown her out of her own hospital? In the conference room, the hospital board members sat in stunned silence as they watched the security footage. The crystal-clear video showed every moment of Karen's discrimination, not just against Maya, but against others as well. The audio recordings were even more damning. Every dismissive comment, every violation of hospital policy, every moment of prejudice was captured in perfect detail. Karen sat in her chair, becoming smaller with each passing minute. The attitude that had made her so bold the night before had completely vanished. When Maya played the recording of Karen's certain types of people comment, several board members shook their heads in disbelief. "I've been receiving complaints about discriminatory treatment in our emergency room for months," Maya explained to the board. But without proof, it was always a case of one person's word against another. So I decided to experience it firsthand. The young nurse who had been asked to stay couldn't help but speak up. "Dr. Richardson, I tried to say something last night, but..." Maya smiled at her kindly. "I know you did, and that's exactly why you're here. We need more people like you who are willing to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult." Karen finally found her voice, though it trembled. "Dr. Richardson, please, I had no idea it was you. I was just trying to protect the hospital's resources." "That's exactly the problem," Maya interrupted, her voice firm. "You treated me differently because of how I looked. Would you have acted the same way if I had walked in wearing this suit?" She gestured to her current outfit. "Our hospital's mission is to provide care for everyone, regardless of their appearance or ability to pay. That's not just our policy, it's the law." The board members looked at each other, their expressions grave. The chairman cleared his throat. "Dr. Richardson, what do you recommend we do about this situation?" Maya stood up, picking up a thick folder from the table. "I've prepared a comprehensive proposal for changes in our emergency room procedures. But first," she turned to Karen, who seemed to be fighting back tears, "we need to address what happened last night." The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone expected Karen to be fired on the spot. But Maya had spent a sleepless night thinking about how to handle this situation. She knew that simply firing one nurse wouldn't solve the deeper problems she had witnessed. Maya looked around the conference room, taking in the expectant faces of the board members, the nervous hospital staff, and Karen's trembling form. The easy thing would be to fire Karen on the spot. Everyone expected it, and no one would blame her. But Maya hadn't built this hospital by taking the easy path. Last night, Maya began, her voice steady, I saw things that broke my heart. Not just Karen's actions, but an entire system that allows discrimination to flourish. Firing one person won't fix that system. She paused, letting her words sink in. So I'm proposing something different. Karen looked up, confusion mixing with the fear on her face. The board members leaned forward, intrigued. Maya opened her folder and pulled out several documents. I'm establishing a new program at our hospital, she continued. We're partnering with the Downtown Community Health Center. Yes, the same one Karen told me to go to last night. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Every staff member will spend time working there, learning firsthand about the challenges our most vulnerable patients face. The room erupted in whispers. This was unprecedented. Maya held up her hand for silence. Karen, you have a choice. You can either accept immediate termination, or you can be the first participant in this program. 6 months at the Community Health Center, working directly with the people you were so quick to dismiss. The young nurse who had tried to help the night before couldn't hide her smile. Some board members nodded approvingly, while others looked skeptical. Karen sat frozen, her eyes wide. But that's just the beginning, Maya continued, pulling out more papers from her folder. We're implementing comprehensive changes throughout the hospital. Every employee, from janitors to chief surgeons, will undergo mandatory training in cultural sensitivity and unconscious bias. We're establishing a patient advocacy office that will be open 24/7, and we're creating an anonymous reporting system for both patients and staff. She turned to the young nurse. Speaking up against wrongdoing shouldn't cost someone their job. That's why we're also implementing a whistleblower protection policy. What you did last night, trying to help despite pressure from your superior, that's exactly the kind of integrity we need. The nurse blushed but sat up straighter in her chair. Other staff members in the room looked thoughtful, perhaps remembering times they had stayed silent when they should have spoken up. Dr. Richardson, one board member, spoke up. These changes will be expensive. The shareholders will understand that this is non-negotiable, Maya interrupted firmly. I've already spoken with our major investors. We're a hospital first, a business second. If we can't provide care with dignity to every patient who walks through our doors, we have no business being in healthcare. She walked over to Karen, who hadn't moved or spoken. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. 6 months at the Community Health Center, learning what it really means to care for people who have nothing. Or immediate termination, your choice. Karen finally found her voice, though it was barely a whisper. The Community Health Center, what exactly would I be doing? Everything, Maya replied. Taking vital signs, changing bedding, helping patients fill out forms, listening to their stories. You'll work alongside doctors and nurses who have dedicated their lives to helping those in need. You'll learn why someone might come to an emergency room with no insurance, no home, and nothing but hope that someone will help them. The room was silent as everyone waited for Karen's response. After what seemed like an eternity, she spoke, her voice shaky but clear. I'll do it. The 6 months. I want to learn. Maya nodded, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. This was why she had chosen this path instead of simple punishment, because sometimes people just needed a chance to see the world through different eyes. There's one more thing, Maya added, addressing the entire room. Starting today, I'll be making random undercover visits to different departments. It might be next week, next month, or next year. You won't know if the homeless person in the waiting room or the confused elderly patient in the hallway is actually your boss. The message was clear. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a fundamental change in how the hospital would operate. Several staff members straightened in their seats, already thinking about how they treated every patient they encountered. We're going to become a model for other hospitals, Maya declared, her voice filled with determination. Not just in medical care, but in human care. Every person who walks through our doors deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance, background, or ability to pay. That's not just our job, it's our privilege. 1 year later, Richardson Memorial Hospital had transformed in ways that surprised even Maya herself. The emergency room, once a place of tension and discrimination, had become a model of compassionate care. The changes were visible everywhere, from the welcoming smiles at the front desk to the new signs in multiple languages that read, "Everyone deserves care." Maya stood in her office, looking out at the busy hospital grounds. She was reading a letter from a patient, one of many that now arrive regularly. This one was from an elderly man who had been treated last week. "I've never felt so respected in a hospital," he wrote. "Your staff didn't just treat my illness, they treated me like a human being." A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. It was Karen, looking very different from the person she'd been a year ago. Her 6 months at the community health center had turned into 8. She'd asked to stay longer, saying she wasn't done learning yet. Now she was back at the hospital, but not as the same nurse she'd been before. "Dr. Richardson," Karen said, excitement clear in her voice. "The new community outreach program numbers are in. We've helped over 3,000 people in the past 3 months who would have never sought medical care otherwise." Her eyes sparkled with genuine enthusiasm, something that would have been unimaginable a year ago. Maya smiled, remembering the angry, prejudiced nurse from that night. The transformation wasn't just in Karen's behavior, it was in her entire way of thinking. After her time at the community health center, she had become one of the strongest advocates for patient rights in the hospital. "Tell me about the youth program," Maya said, sitting down at her desk. This was Karen's special project, something she had proposed herself after returning from her time at the community health center. Karen pulled out a folder, her hands steady and confident. "We've got 20 high school students from low-income neighborhoods starting their medical training next month. Each one will be paired with a mentor from our staff." She paused, then added softly, "Some of them remind me of the people I used to turn away." The weight of that admission hung in the air for a moment. Both women remembered that night, but now it served as a reminder of how far they'd come. The young nurse who had tried to help that night was now the head of their new patient advocacy department, making sure no one ever felt powerless in their hospital again. "The other hospitals are starting to notice," Maya said, picking up a healthcare industry magazine from her desk. Their hospital was featured on the cover, praised for its innovative approach to inclusive healthcare. "They're asking how we did it." Karen nodded, her face serious. "I've been invited to speak at 3 medical conferences about our transformation. Can you believe it? Me teaching others about compassionate care." She laughed softly at the irony. Just then, Maya's phone buzzed with a message from security. Another random inspection was due, one of the undercover visits that had become regular practice. Sometimes Maya went herself, other times she sent trained observers. The staff never knew which patient might be evaluating their care, and they had created a culture where everyone was treated with equal respect. "The community health center called yesterday," Karen said, changing the subject. "They want to expand our partnership. They're getting more patients than they can handle since word got out about our program." She hesitated, then added, "I'd like to volunteer there on my days off. There's still so much more to learn." Maya felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the memory of that night's chest pains. This was why she hadn't fired Karen, because sometimes, when given the chance, people could change in ways you never expected. The hospital intercom crackled to life, announcing a staff meeting in the auditorium. It was time for their monthly all-hands gathering, where employees shared stories of patient care and discussed ways to improve. These meetings had become a cornerstone of their new culture, where everyone's voice mattered. As they walked to the auditorium together, Maya and Karen passed the emergency room. Through the glass doors, they could see the waiting room, clean, welcoming, and staffed by people who truly cared. A homeless man was being helped at the front desk, receiving the same respectful treatment as the well-dressed businessman beside him. The young students from their medical training program were there too, shadowing the staff and learning not just about medicine, but about humanity. Maya watched as one student helped an elderly woman with her paperwork, showing the kind of patience and compassion that no textbook could teach. Karen said quietly as they walked, "That night changed more than just our hospital. It changed me. I never realized how much prejudice I carried until I had to face it in myself." She stopped walking and turned to Maya. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Maya smiled, remembering her grandmother's words about how change happens, not always through punishment, but through understanding. "We all have the capacity to grow," she said. "Sometimes we just need the right opportunity." As they entered the packed auditorium, Maya looked at the faces before her. Doctors, nurses, staff members, students, all part of something bigger than themselves. The hospital hadn't just changed its policies, it had changed its heart. And in doing so, it had become exactly what her grandmother had dreamed of, a place where everyone, regardless of who they were or where they came from, could find healing and hope.